Okay, I think we're all set. Let me just give you back the host. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Just make
And I'll
me
make you
co-host
co-host.
whenever you're ready.
There you go, Lester. Where do you want to
So,
travel to?
I don't know, maybe Greece, Japan,
Did you say France?
Greece and Japan, maybe.
Japan. Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah, it's been my dream since childhood to go there.
Good evening, Detlef. It's pretty late there.
Boy, you look familiar. Yeah,
You
it's
do too.
10:30.
10:30. Yeah.
It's finally starting to cool down. It was pretty warm today.
Really?
But yeah, I've got 3 fans going.
What was the temperature Celsius?
Well, right now it's still 25 Celsius in here, and it was up to 28, so that's in the 80s, but the humidity's high.
So
Makes it-
you must have pretty long days there. You're getting pretty far north.
Oh yeah, I'm about the same latitude as the southern edge of Hudson Bay. So, I mean, it's still somewhat light outside. And got awakened this morning by the sun shining on my face at 4:30. So, which is nice in the summer, but it's let me put on some more light here, but it's not really that nice in the winter.
There's two sides to it. The only other option is to be someone who migrates in the winter south.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was kind of my idea, spend the winter back in the States and the summers over here. And this pandemic kind of screwed things up this last year. You're
It
in
did.
Shenandoah Valley, did you say?
I'm in the Shenandoah Valley, western part of Virginia. So
Virginia.
you
So you're
sh-
about the same level as the middle of Italy.
I'm 38 degrees.
Okay. I was going to say, are you 40 degrees? Because Denver is 40. And Denver is the same, I think, the same latitude as Naples. So people don't realize how much further north you are when you're in Europe.
Yeah, that's right. The farthest north I've been is, I've been to Kiel, which is,
Yeah.
I've actually
north of
been
here.
above Kiel. I've been up to Flensburg, Denmark.
Yeah.
But I might have been farther north when I was in John O'Groats, which is the tippy top, northernmost top of Scotland. They're both around
Okay.
58, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I was in Kiel the last time in 2014, and I was there like this time of year, and the days were really long. Like it was light till like 11, and then it was like 4:30. It was light again.
Yeah.
I took yeah.
Well, in another month, at the height of summer, it'll be light until 11:30, and then it'll start getting light again at about 3:30. So, I grew up here as a kid, and then I spent the last 30 years in Denver, and I don't know how I managed to live here in the winter. It's especially when you live in Colorado where you've got so much sun, in the middle of winter, you're ready to kill yourself.
Yep. Is it Nifa?
Nethia is how you say it.
Oh, I see. There's an A in there. Yes, Nefia. Welcome, Nefia.
Thank you.
From Sacramento.
Yep.
And hi, Astrid, and hi, Pat.
Hello. There was interesting conversation on the length of daylight.
Where are you from, Pat?
I'm in Paulsbo. So right now we have about 15 hours of daylight.
Where was that again?
Hallsville, Washington.
Oh,
Oh, you're pretty far north.
Yep.
Yes. So the top of the United States is the 49th parallel. I think it
Yeah.
is. So from 1998 until 2003, I lived in Boise, Idaho. And so it's far north, but it's also very far west. It's actually could almost be in the Pacific time zone. And so we would have those very long days, and it would be light until 11:30 at night, and then it would be light again at 4:30. And I actually like the long days there myself, but
Oh.
there's always that flip side. You have the
Yep.
winter, and
Around Christmas time, it doesn't get light until 9:30, 10, and it's dark at 3 o'clock.
Oh,
yeah,
So that's really bad. You know, I lived in Östersund in northern Sweden when I was a kid, and it's only like that far away from the Arctic Circle. And in the summer, the sun doesn't set up there at all. I mean, it goes down to the horizon and it comes right back up again.
yeah, I'd like to see that someday. I have an ambition to get up to northern Norway or Sweden or somewhere like that and see or the Shetland Islands. I think the northern Shetland Islands is similar. That's a place I'd like to go, or the Faroe Islands.
Yes,
So-
yeah, I'd like to go to the Faroe Islands, or they've got this mail ship cruise that goes in the fjords in northern Norway that I've heard a lot about. It's supposed to be really interesting, gorgeous.
I think I've heard about that cruise too. And pardon everyone for the travel banter. We're just waiting for folks to join, but it's all about travel. I have friends from Idaho who went, I think, on that cruise. They said it was like a ferry. They just kept going from
Mhm.
town to town. People got on and got off at the next place, and they were just like a cruise. They were just staying on board, but they got off at every town for a couple hours and could look around and take
Yeah.
photos and had a great time. And I've actually been thinking of doing a class, inviting them to do a class on that
What is
cruise.
it? What is the cruise about? Or what?
It's on the coast of Norway,
Oh,
and I think it has something to do with delivering the mail
Yeah.
up there. You can get on the ship, and it's not really a cruise line ship, but it's like being on a cruise. You just kind of go along with them and just get to
Wow.
see everything.
And they have guest cabins, so you stay on the ship.
Yeah.
But my friends went there in October, and they actually went up to the Arctic Circle and then back down. And they said it was a great experience. They
Yeah.
ate very well and enjoyed it. So I'm going to ask them about that. So, well, welcome also, Florence. Good to have you with us. We're enjoying the discussion here of how long our days are. And so, is it Nifia?
yes.
And you are from Sacramento, California.
Yep.
Pacific time. Astrid, where are you from?
From New York.
New York. Okay. Well, I know New York well. How about Pat? Or Florence?
I'm the one from Postville.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You're from Washington. And Florence, where are you from? I feel like I've known this from before. Well, one thing we can all talk about before I start the class is if you have any plans for travel this year or next, or you're just thinking, would you be thinking of going?
I'll go. I have a trip planned, going to Morocco, Spain, and Portugal,
Ooh.
September and October.
Of this year?
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
I
You have your
know.
flight? You have your flight already?
I have my flight to and from Lisbon, and then we're going to take connecting flights into Morocco. And yeah, we'll fly into Lisbon, travel around Portugal, go up through Spain for about a week, and then I'll fly wherever I end up into into Morocco, and then I'll go from Morocco back to Lisbon and then Lisbon home.
That sounds like a great
I have
experience.
I have part of the flights.
Are you on TAP, the
no.
Portuguese airline?
No.
No.
Uh-uh. I know part of the group really wanted to do that, but I'm going over early. I'm going to be doing some traveling, and I got, I think, a pretty good flight out of Oakland to Lisbon, and then Lisbon back home. It was like total, like less than 550 round trip.
Wow.
Yeah,
What
so
a
Fantastic.
I couldn't pass it up.
yeah.
I still have to buy my flight in and out of Morocco, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, that's
I
a
have
great
some-
flight.
I have someone that I went to high school with, and she and her husband spent several years going to Morocco and traveling around on an RV.
Oh,
And she said she just absolutely loved it. The people are fantastic there.
oh, good. Good to know. Yeah.
Well, and one thing to remember is that those cultures between North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula have been related to one another for thousands of years. We tend to think in America, you draw a border of a country or there's a body of water, and we forget that in past times, like for most of human history,
Yeah.
the fastest way to get from one place to another was by boat. And so different sides of the Mediterranean, or even a place as close as Morocco and southern Spain, were much closer to each other by ship or boat than they were to like the northern part of the southern part of their country.
Mhm.
And that was a revelation that hit me only in more recent, in the last decade, when I learned about cultures. And it would have made sense, because when I was a kid, I'd see a map of the Roman Empire or Carthage or something, and they'd show, the empire all ringing the Mediterranean, for example.
Mhm.
Anyway, very interesting.
Mhm.
Welcome, Melinda. No problem for being late. We're just doing some talk here about where people plan to go this year. And Nifia was telling us about a great trip she's got set in September and October to Portugal, Spain, and Morocco, which really sounds fabulous. My daughter Nifia did a semester study abroad in Spain, and
Oh.
and they went to three different. Maybe they lived in three different places, but where she spent about a month was in Morocco,
Mm.
and she lived with a Muslim family that slaughtered a goat for I don't remember what it was for, some holiday, and the goat was in the house with the family before it happened. So
Oh.
anyway, she says quite an experience. She'll never forget it. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you all here. We're sharing about travel experiences. You're welcome to put any experiences you're thinking of having this year in the chat as I get going. Otherwise, you're welcome as I'm going along today, just to interject questions. This should be a fun class. We're going to talk about traveling overseas on a budget. And my philosophy is more with less, so you can get more travel if you spend less on your travel, or as I say, the less you spend, the more you can travel.
Mhm.
And I have no problem with people that want to spend more money and take one trip in their life. That's just fine with me. But I'm a person that likes to travel a lot, and I'd rather save my money when I can so I can do it again. And so I'm always looking for bargains. And this class was developed specifically for people who really didn't know where to start to plan a trip. So I know some of you are quite veteran travelers, and you can certainly give your 2 cents worth here. Detlef, that's a place not far for you. You might know it.
Yeah, it's in Munich.
That's in Munich. Yep. That's the I think that's the Marienkirche, I think, or Frauenkirche.
Marienkirche, yeah.
Maybe it's a Frauenkirche. Anyway, it's their kind of iconic
Yeah.
site, and that one tower is encased in a scaffold. It looks like it's got a cast on it. For some reason, over the last decade, in a lot of my travels to Europe, I've been going to places where some of the most iconic sites, especially cathedrals, which are among my favorite places to visit, have been encased in scaffolding. I was in Durham when their fabulous tower was encased in a scaffold. I was in York when the same thing happened. This is Munich. And that's just, those are the ones that just jump to my mind. I've been in others, but just like in America, when we're traveling down the road and there's construction on the highway, it's going to happen. Well,
Russ,
yes.
I was speaking of that kind of thing. I was in Prague, and their famous clock in the clock tower, which is probably in the center of the old town square. And it was encased for restoration. And so that the wrapping had a digital, not only a digital of it, but one that moved. So, but it was funny to see all these tourists standing around taking pictures of the digital reproduction of the clock.
Well, probably.
Fortunately, I had seen it 10 years earlier.
Yeah. Well, you can always go back. That's my excuse. Well, I guess I have to go back and see it without all that scaffolding. When I was in Santiago de Compostela in 2018, after walking 500 miles across Spain, the big thing to do was to wind up in the Western Plaza and then enter through the Western entrance, as pilgrims have been doing for 1,000 years. But when I was there, the Western entrance was closed and the entire Western facade of the cathedral was encased in scaffolding. It's now gone. I'll be back someday. So I figured, Nifria.
Yes, I also walked part of I only walked part of the Camino, but I was there in 2015 and there was scaffolding all around.
Yeah, I think it's been there for years. I will say this, it took them hundreds of years to build some of these cathedrals. Commonly, it took them hundreds of years. And so I figure I really shouldn't complain if for a few years or a decade, they're fixing it because it's only been there. Some cases, they've been there like 700-800 years. And of course, we don't want it to fall down. So,
does anyone know what's going on with the Notre Dame now after that huge fire destroyed it?
I haven't read about it in a while, Melinda. I did read about that it's not going to be restored exactly the same way it was. That's the last I read. Anybody else got an update or seen pictures or stories? I'll have to research that and do a class on it. That sounds like fun. That's one of Western culture's iconic spots, is the Cathedral de Notre Dame.
Fortunately, I was in it right before it went up in flames. So it was.
Well, I was going to say to Nifia, I am doing a class on walking the Camino coming up in July. Really? I've done one in the past here and I've let it rest for a few months while I get a new audience. And we're going to be focusing on travel in Spain in July. We'll be doing not only travel in Spain, but we'll be doing some cuisine of Spain. If you're taking Deb's cooking classes, and Scott will talk a bit about photography. And if any of you had not had the chance to take any of Jerry's wine classes, I almost said wine classes, we're going to get Jerry to do wines of Spain. And I can only imagine, we're hoping that Donna does some things about music and art in Spain. So everything Spain in July, everything Italy in August. And then probably in September, we're going to start talking about the Blue Zone. So we'll travel. If anybody's traveled to Blue Zone, you can let me know. Anyway, most of you know me, Russ Eanes. I'm from Harrisonburg, Virginia. Actually did a class on Shenandoah Valley last week. In fact, it's coming up again this week. That's going to be Thursday at 4:30. We'll be repeating the Shenandoah Valley class. I'm an avid traveler with a lot of overseas trips. I love them all. And my love for overseas travel started probably from my father. And Wednesday evening at 7:30, if you want to join me, sorry, Detlef, that's pretty late for you. I'm going to repeat it at an earlier time in July. I'll be doing a class called Travels with My Father. You can always watch it, the class on Google, YouTube. And I Travels with My Father because my father went to Europe 3 times between 1965 and 1967 for business, and sent home postcards and letters and brought home slides. And in my travels, whenever I've wound up in a place that he had been and sent a postcard from or took a picture with slides from, I've tried to find that spot. And it was a lot of fun. And I'm going to talk about how I found some of the scenes in his postcards, but even more importantly, how I tracked down where he took his slides in Rome, 1966. And I took pictures mostly from the same spot in 2019. So that was 50 some years later. Anyway, a lot of fun. Join us Wednesday evening, 7:30. You all know that we learn from each other in these classes. Ideally, we've got our cameras on, we can see each other. And you all know that you can request a recording of the class after the class. We are live streaming today. So if anybody's watching us on live stream, the best way is to participate. The best way to participate is to join us and register for the class. Jump right in. Lastly, we're not paid to promote any specific products. I think today we'll be promoting some websites though, and you can look at those, but we're not paid to do any of that. Today's agenda is pretty simple, and you all can share with me your ideas because I always have a piece of paper when I'm teaching a class. If somebody gives me a good idea, I jot it down, add it to my notes. Our objectives today is going to talk about traveling more with less. Okay. And as I'm trying to let somebody in, I have accidentally scrolled forward. More travel, less money. This class is for you if you want to know how and where to begin to planning a trip. So I did have had a lot of people in the past want to know, how do you plan a trip? We're going to do a little bit of a comparison of a tour versus an individual traveling. And maybe we'll get into that day because we've got a lot of experienced travelers here. And some of us can share about some of our tour experiences and a little bit about trip planning process. I always say the foundation of saving money on travel is what I call slow travel. That is just taking your time, being somewhere, immersing yourself in a culture, learning the food, learning the geography, learning the history, learning everything you can about a culture while you're there. Experience more in fewer places. That's my philosophy. I'm not the only one who has it. I certainly didn't coin the term, but it's one I use a lot. This is my wife. Actually, we went on a walk in Italy in 2019, the last time we traveled anywhere overseas. And we're entering a little village called Macanone. And the only place in it that we could stay was a hotel. Nice little village. Actually, I wouldn't mind going back there sometime and looking around a little more, but I was pretty tired. I'd walked 25 kilometers by the time I got to that place that day. And by the time supper was over, I was pooped. But here's an interesting little cultural thing. There was a sign across the street from the restaurant, and we were sitting outside while we ate supper, and we could see something about the Italian Communist Party. It was an old sign. So it was interesting. Wouldn't be something you'd see in the US. Well, the first thing, and you all know this when you want to travel, is decide on possible destinations. Where do you dream of going to? Or maybe you have a dream about an experience of being somewhere. One of my earliest dreams was to travel to England. And this is the Tower of London. Look at it. It's enclosed in the scaffolding. Notice that one front tower there is all wrapped up. They're doing work. I said, I always somewhere when they're wrapping it up. It's okay. This tower is about 1,000 years old. Well, maybe 800 years, but who's counting, right? 1,800. In the US, that's nothing. I mean, that's much more than we have. In Europe, it's nothing. Dreamt to go, always read about Henry VIII, the tower and all that kind of thing. Well, I had, when I got to London for the very first time, was there in business in 1998. And I had an appointment somewhere around the neighborhood of the Tower of London. And so after our appointment, we had a couple hours before the next appointment. My wife was with me, and we decided to take a walk all the way around the tower as much as we could. And I was just blown away thinking, here I am standing outside this old history. Because in the US, again, if something is 200 years old, that's old. We do have stuff as old as this, but the cultures who created it are gone. So we don't necessarily have a connection to it, which is unfortunate. But the thing that probably got me the most was when I stood on the north side of the tower, either the north, I think it's the east side. So looking in this picture, we're from across the Thames, we're looking north. And I think off to the east side over here somewhere, there's remnants of the Roman wall. And when we were just walking around, I saw that chunk that said Roman wall, like AD 179 or something like that. And I was just like, wow, that is old. But I'd been dreaming all my life to go to England, and got to go there, spend 10 days, was something that I loved, and didn't get back for another decade. And then it was another 4 years before I got back again. But it was the first 3 overseas destinations I ever went to were all in England. I enjoyed it so much. Easier on learning the language if you're in England, unless you happen to be on a ferry with a bunch of drunk Scots, in which case you won't understand a single thing they've said. Sometimes we have other dreams too. This is one of my dreams, and there's no pun intended because I believe that's a Dreamliner. And I think, Melinda, you said you got to fly on one. And this is actually at Dulles Airport. I don't know if I was coming in from a flight, or I think I was waiting to catch a flight. And I just walked down their international concourse, and Dulles Airport has a very large international concourse. And I spotted this and I wanted to get a picture of it. I'm pretty sure it's an Air France plane, because back when I took this, which is probably about 2015 or 2016, the only airline flying out of Dulles with a Dreamliner was Air France. And anyway, I have an ambition someday to get on one. So I might abandon my more with less philosophy just once and pay a little extra to make sure I can get on a Dreamliner flight to Paris.
Actually, if Norwegian Air starts flying again, you can fly a Dreamliner cheap.
Well, I'm going to keep that in mind, Melinda. I'm hoping for Norwegian Air.
That they are. I was out in at the Boeing plant when they were developing this plane, and it was quite interesting because they were taking a big gamble against Air France on because Air France's planes were getting bigger and bigger. And
you mean Airbus?
Airbus. I'm sorry, Airbus. And they decided that they were going to go towards a smaller plane that could do more, more stops, which you can do with, the problem with a really giant plane, it can only fly between like New York and London, big places. And it's turned out fuel wise and everything to be a very smart choice. But the windows are bigger. The whole
isn't it two levels?
No, it's one level.
One level. Okay.
Yeah, it's
well,
actually it's a smaller plane than
maybe this isn't it.
747.
Maybe I've got it wrong. Detlef, do you know?
Actually, it looks like the 280, which is
Is that the
a
one that
double
has
level,
double two levels?
which is a double level and
that
carries some ridiculous number like 500 people.
Is that
Yeah,
is that an Airbus?
Yeah, it's an I think it's the Airbus 280.
I think that's what this is, because I saw it from the side, and later on I've got a photograph. I've got a picture of a 747, which was another ambition of
Yeah.
mine, and I did fly that on Lufthansa to Frankfurt. But anyway,
Yeah,
those are other dreams.
I think the Dreamliner only has 2 engines too, rather than 4.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a smaller plane for transatlantic, but it is nice. I mean, the windows are bigger, the whole filtration system, and it's really designed to take care of jet lag. And,
Oh, that's good.
well,
For those that haven't traveled a lot, and again, a lot of you have, or at least several of you I know have traveled a lot. The first thing I do when I plan a trip is I develop a budget. So I research my costs, and the big cost, of course, is, well, the big cost, one single big cost is flights, but honestly, lodging costs more depending on how long you're staying. So if you're going to be somewhere 2 weeks, you're going to spend more on lodging than you are on flights. But my philosophy is I like to go somewhere for at least 2 weeks. 3 is better, because the cost of the flight is then less for the amount of time you're gone. For me to go overseas, it's kind of hard to go for less than for just a week. For one thing, it takes you a day or two to get over jet lag, and that's a long flight back as well. So, again, for those that are planning, we research the various costs, flights, lodging. There's going to be transportation on the ground, and that's going to vary. We're going to have to figure out whether we're going to rent a car. I always advocate take mass transit, buses, trains. Right now in the US, actually, I'm not sure what's like in Europe, but right now the cost of rental cars is through the roof, and 3 to 4 times the normal cost. Is that the same thing true in Europe, Detlef?
I don't know because I haven't rented any here, but I've been reading about car rental costs going up, and I couldn't figure out why.
Well, here's the reason. First of all, so the airlines got relief last year when travel stopped. The car rental companies didn't. So in order to keep themselves afloat, they sold a big chunk of their fleets. So the cars that they had went. I think I've read something like 30 to 40% of their rental fleet was sold. 40 might be high, but 30 is still a lot. And then they canceled all their orders for new cars. And then, so they found themselves with a reduced fleet coming into this year. And then when they decided to turn around and start ordering more, the U.S. auto manufacturing sector
Right.
is in a pinch because they can't get microchips. And so the reason I know this is because I went to Maine about a week ago and spent a long weekend with my son. And normally I would fly to Portland, rent a car. A long weekend rental would be maybe $150 to $180 maximum, $30 a day, maybe $25 a day. Your taxes and fees always add a lot, but still that's not that much for 4-day rental. Well, I looked at it, it was going to be between maybe $350 to $400 to rent a car. And I knew the car was mostly just going to sit at his house. And I said, I think I'm going to look at some other options. He's about an hour away from Portland Airport. And because of his schedule, it's hard for him to pop down and pick me up. So fortunately, I found that there's a bus from that goes up to where he lives that left about 20 minutes after I landed. So that was no problem. I caught a bus for $10 each, my wife and me, and then we caught the bus back, $10 each. We actually walked from the bus station to the airport when we came back. So that was a very inexpensive thing. But that's when I said, what's going on here? And then I started seeing article after article about what's happening with the rentals in the US. So I've been advising people, think twice about a car rental in the US. I haven't had a chance to find out if that's true in Europe, but in Europe, in the last couple of years, I have tended to shy away from car rentals because unless you're in Ireland or Scotland and going long distances, usually you can get somewhere with mass transit just fine.
Yeah, the car rental costs here in Berlin are very high compared to the US. I mean, when I come back, I'll rent a car there, but the prices here, there's only a few companies, whereas in the US, you've got half a dozen to choose from. So that the prices stay fairly high in Germany. So I don't know if they've gone up now. What I've been concentrating on is getting one of these, what are they called? That they have like 6,000 of these little smart cars spread around in Berlin. They have it in Denver also. They've got about 400 of them. You have an app, you give a code in, it opens up, you drive wherever you want to go, and you just park it there and leave it. And you pay by the minute. But it's cheaper than getting a rental car for all day.
Okay. Hi, Ada. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Looks like there's two of you. That's fabulous. Well, I'll go on a little bit more, just some more of the things we want to think about when we're developing our budget or sites we might want to see. And there are things that have pretty stiff entrance fees. So I think if you want to go to the Eiffel Tower, it might be 30 or 40 euros or something like that, depending on how high up you want to go. And they're figuring out how far in advance you want to reserve a spot because there's long lines. And then of course there's food and meals, and there's lots of things to think about there. For example, do you want to eat out every day? I don't. My wife and I usually stay in a guest apartment or a place with a kitchen, and we eat in twice a day, and or pack a lunch or something like that, or pack a supper. Sometimes when you're eating out, the cheaper meal you can get of a major meal is the lunch. It might be the same thing you'd get at supper, but it might cost you a couple pounds or a couple of euros less. And it's quite filling. And of course, when I'm in England, I always go out for tea in the afternoon. I got to have tea and scones because no one makes them quite like they do. These are all the things you need to add up on your budget. And those of you that are travelers know this.
This is a good place to point out that this is one place with home exchange you can really save both on especially if you exchange a car and the house. So, and if you're looking for long-term, so.
Good point, Melinda. Melinda's going to be doing a class.
Having Wednesday's class.
We have home exchange coming up Wednesday at 2:30, and then a week from then we're going to do a second part of home exchange. So
on the details.
The devil's in the details. Well, there's some other considerations now when you're working on a budget. Again, I think a lot of you are veteran travelers, you know this, but I always tell people there's slow and busy seasons. So you have to investigate that, and slow and busy seasons are different in every country. All cultures and times are different. For example, you don't want to go to Italy or in August because the Italians are all on vacation. A lot of things might be closed. I think that's also true in France.
Plus it's hot as heck.
And it's hot as heck. But also there's very busy tourist seasons and things cost more. And if you're trying to avoid that, you want to stay away from that. There are often cheaper things in the off season. If you're willing to put up with some of the things. So like Detlef's talking about how short the days are in Germany. And I've been in Germany 5 times and I've been there 3 times in October. And I've discovered that at least where I stayed was in October, it was overcast a lot.
I was going to say, every time I've gone to Germany, it's raining,
Yeah.
especially in October.
I've been in there in the summer. It was delightful, but it was kind of overcast in October. Some other things to consider when you're traveling is check currency exchange rates. They do vary. Right now, they're better for the Europeans, meaning that they can buy more dollars when they come here. We can buy fewer euros or pounds. It's not that off the chart. To give an example, when I went to the UK in 2008, I think the exchange rate was $1.96. That's what a pound costs. So every time I was looking at the price of a rental or a bed and breakfast or a meal, I was kind of calculating it, almost doubling it. Went back in 2012, it was like $1.56. And then I went there in 2016. I happened to be there. I've shared this before, the day after Brexit. I was there on the day of Brexit. It's actually there for 10 days before Brexit. And was in Scotland the day of the Brexit vote. And the next day, the pound sank like a stone. It went from like $1.41 US to like $1.25 or something like that. I
Did
immediately
you
went
stock
to
up on them for future trips?
I went to an ATM and I just withdrew a whole bunch of cash. I said, if I don't need it now, I'll need it later because I don't think that exchange rate's going to last. Other things to keep in mind, we mentioned weather, and there are places that are less comfortable at certain times of the year, too hot, too cold, too overcast. That's got to be into your trip planning considerations. And reading a guidebook will tell you, I mean, I've got guidebooks here on Italy because that's sort of the hypothetical trip I plan for the example of our classes. And I know when the warm and cold seasons are, and I know that you can actually go to southern Italy in the winter. It's not too bad.
I recommend AccuWeather's site and pull up the monthly.
Okay.
And they give you the past year and the past 2 years actual temperatures, and then the predicted, and then also what the average is. And that is really handy as far as
AccuWeather. Thanks for telling me about that, Melinda.
Yeah.
I'm going to look that up because some of our guidebooks may not be up to date with global warming. I was trying to look in my guidebook here for Rome because this is the DK, my favorite guides, and they often have a section on weather, and they show you the different temperatures throughout the year. I'm not laying my hands on that right now, but you can often see the temperature variation and rain.
And it's important for packing.
Yes. And rain. Watch out for rain. There might be a time when now again, I went to the UK in 2018, spent 3 weeks there, biked across it, took all my rain stuff. Didn't rain once. Another thing to keep an eye out for is local events. So you might be in a certain place when there's something big happening. And when I was in Italy in 2019, we happened to be in Assisi on the day of the Feast of St. Francis, which is why I discovered later I'd had such a hard time finding a place to stay because there were big festivals around that. If you're trying to avoid crowds in Munich, you probably don't want to go there in Oktoberfest if you're trying to avoid crowds. And frankly, you can enjoy yourself, in my opinion, as much without the Oktoberfest. Haven't been there, but I've read about it plenty. Also, there's entry expense to sites is something to consider, and that can vary. There are certain days when there's free days that you can watch out for. And your passport. So this is one thing I've been telling a lot of people lately. If you're an American and you're thinking of traveling abroad in the next year or two, and maybe you used to travel a lot and you didn't go anywhere in 2020 and your passport is sitting in a lockbox or somewhere, wherever it's sitting. Mine's in a fireproof box. So if the house burns down, at least I can travel. If you haven't been there in a long time, you better go check that expiration date because it might be getting close and you haven't noticed that. And I've shared this in other classes that when you go to Europe, for example, you have to have at least 90 days left in your passport to enter. And I knew a guy once who had 90 days on his passport when he left Washington Dulles Airport, and he forgot a little detail, which is that he was on a red-eye flight, and he arrived the next morning and he had 89 days on his passport, and they would not let him in. So I would say if you're thinking of traveling, get your renewal now. Definitely smart to renew it before it expires. I don't have handy right now the renewal cost. I think it's $110, and renewal can take 2 to 4 weeks. That's all renewal, which is not as long as getting a new passport. If you don't have a passport, you got to travel, you may be in for a wait. It could be months. So I've read anywhere from 4 to 8 months. So if check that passport as something to look out for, that's going to be part of your budget as well. So in a hypothetical Italy trip I've been looking at with my wife, kind of doubting I'm going to make it, but we were toying with the idea of going over there in September. The idea came up because I saw flights at this price, kind of like yours, Nifia. I saw that flight and I said, that's almost too good to pass up. You could fly over on a direct flight, by the way, from Washington Dulles to Rome for anywhere from $530 to $680. And of course, that's the variance that you're going to get if you want to select your seat and It's
Is that round trip?
That's round trip.
Wow.
Direct. And I'm a big direct flight person because you get on the plane, it takes the least amount of time. You don't have to stop anywhere and have something go wrong, like missing a connection or something like that. I've had that happen. So I like direct flights. I consider myself fortunate. I live close enough to an international airport that I can get those. So again, I know they're not available everywhere. Our budget was 530 to 800, 680 round trip each. And then our lodging, I was seeing guest apartments in Spoleto and Spello, 2 towns in the Umbrian region, for as low as $500 a week. Actually, I've now since seen some that are even less than that. Local transportation, I would take the train from the Rome airport to Termini station in Rome, and then from there take a train up to Umbria and back, and including some other bus trips up to various towns, about $120. If we eat out once a day, we budget somewhere around $10 to $20 a day. It's probably not enough. 25 to 30 is probably more like it, even for lunch. We do like to go out and buy groceries. Shopping for food in a foreign country is an experience that I wouldn't miss. So we put in $15 a day, and we figure we might spend $50 seeing some sites. A lot of stuff we like to do is free, but occasionally there's something we want to get into. So our whole budget for 2 weeks is anywhere around $2,500 to $2,800, $2,500 to $2,800, which is a bargain for 2 people. My wife and I always used to say at least $4,000 for 2 weeks.
So a question, Russ, you mentioned Spoleto here and you mentioned Spoleto earlier this evening. What is in Spoleto? I have not heard the name, but obviously there's got to be something there that interests you.
There is. Spoleto is an international festival. They have big arts festivals that are very international. They do music, they do arts, and I'm trying to remember when their festivals are. I'm drawing a blank on what months those festivals are. It's a sizable city, not real sizable, meaning maybe 50,000, not huge. Absolutely gorgeous. Sitting in the edge of some mountains. Is there any place in Italy that isn't sitting on the edge of a mountain or a hill? Well, there is, but everywhere I went in Umbria was sitting on the edge of a hill or a small mountain. It's a beautiful city, Detlef. I would encourage you to check it out. Spoleto. Actually, the photo right here, this is not far from there. This is, I'm drawing the blank on the name of this. This is near the town of Poggio Bustoni. And this is a town we walked through. We actually entered at the top end and walked all the way down to the bottom. And I fell in love with Italian hill towns. I mean, they just really got me. And I walked through them and stayed in them. So Spello, Assisi, Spello is about it's about a 2-day walk from Spoleto. So what is that about? Probably 35 kilometers or something like that. If Spello is famous for a flower festival, and I think they've already had it. I think it's in May.
Isn't
Where-
that part of your Italian walk too, though?
Yes. So if you come to my Italian walk, I'll be doing it again in August. I stayed we walked through Spoleto and Spello, and because I want to write a book about that, we said maybe we should go back and spend 2 weeks in that region and walk a few of the sections that we missed, and just see some more of the places. And I'm easy. You go park me in an Italian city or town for 2 weeks, and I'm just fine. I will really enjoy it. So Spello and Spoleto, 2 absolutely beautiful places. There's a train to each. So I highly recommend them, Detlef. They're not that far from you. You could fly there or take
Yeah.
the train there.
Yeah, I found out there sometimes you can get you could, I don't know how it's going to be now, but like last year, you could get a flight from Berlin to, good grief, to Barcelona, where you left on Saturday morning and came back late on Sunday night for 39 euros round trip. And you could get a room there for Saturday to Sunday morning for about $50. So, you spend 100 to 200 euros, and you've got 2 full days in Barcelona.
In Barcelona, right?
And getting around in Barcelona, you've got the subway and the buses.
Yep.
Air flights, now that they deregulated Europe, is actually cheaper than train now from between a lot of places.
Well, for a hypothesis, this is my hypothetical trip that I've been helping people who want to know how to plan a trip. About 2,500 to 2,800, and I think that's a bargain for 2 people. Myself, again, I think when my wife and I went to the UK in 2008, of course, the exchange rate was much worse then. I think we spent between 4,500 and 5,000 for the 2 of us.
Wow.
Our son traveled with us, and we were there for 2 weeks, and we rented a car. But even that I thought was kind of an average price. So, and again, always when your plans or your budget don't seem to work, you can always readjust. You can look for better deals on flights. We can look at other options for lodging, or like Melinda said, you can look at home exchange. What kinds of local transportation options are they? One thing I mentioned is that speed costs, and sometimes it's worth it. When my wife and I were in France in 2013, this was our first trip to France. We were there about 2 weeks, and we were in Burgundy and Alsace and then Paris, and we rented a car until we got to Paris. And we drove from Strasbourg to Paris. That was a day's trip. And it's not the greatest, most interesting part of France to drive across. And when we got to Paris in the evening, dropped off the car at the airport, took the light rail into the city, got in our hotel, and had enough daylight to go down and walk across the bridge onto the Notre Dame. And of course, pinched myself, I'm here. That's what I said. Well, I reflected later that if I got on a high-speed train at 9 that morning, it would have been there at noon instead of being there at 8. I thought, you know what, maybe that would have been worth it. So those are just, sometimes you do spend more because you spent all that time going there. It depends on what you're going to see. In that case, the car trip wasn't all that worth it. You drive across some of those parts of France. It's just kind of like driving across Kansas, only you're in France. Several of you have been in my classes where we've talked about for trip planning sites like Hopper, Google Flights, Booking.com, Airbnb, and the national train sites. Detlef, I have on my phone the DB app for Deutsche Bahn, and I can book trains and keep my tickets on them. I'm pretty sure every national train line has an app. So get one of those, get your book. You don't have to book your tickets on it. You can, but you can also and pay for it and everything. But you can sometimes local trains. I've never done it, a local train, but a bigger train, the high-speed trains across Germany or France or Italy, I've done it. So those are all worth the trip plan. That, by the way, is the Lufthansa 747, which I did book that flight for just a little bit more because I wanted to fly Lufthansa and I wanted to fly in a 747. I did this in 2014 and I'd been thinking about going on a 747 since like 1969. So it'd been in a few years I'd been thinking about it.
A tip on train travel is Rick Steves' site has a really good way that you can calculate whether or not to buy the tickets, by leg, or to buy a train pass in the country. And then the different kind of train pass, sometimes we ended up using one where you get like 4 days out of the month, and then you pick which 4 days you want to travel or something like that, as opposed to a week consecutive. But anyway, a lot of times the cost between, say, Milan and Florence is not as expensive as you think compared to what a train pass costs you. So, but Rick Steves has got a real good site so that you can kind of calculate for what you want to do if a pass makes more sense than buying the tickets. Of course, the nice thing about pass, you don't have to buy the ticket, you just hop on.
That's right.
Except in Italy, almost all the trains, you end up having to make reservations on them for a seat. So you're stuck with, it's almost like having to get a ticket because you still got to make a reservation.
And what I enjoyed about the German trains, Detlef, was the high-speed trains was when it told me exactly where on the siding to stand to get onto the train for my seat. I really enjoyed it. I had to figure out how to look at the train schedule and the board and figure that out, but it told me exactly where to stand. By the way, in the US right now, I'm going to pitch a bargain. You can get a 30-day Amtrak pass for $299. That is incredible. If I had 30 days to travel around the US, which I don't, but if I did, I would buy one of those. I don't know how many legs you get, but there's just so many legs you can take in 30 days. That's anywhere in the US.
I can
Nithya.
answer that. Yeah, it's a 10 segment, 10 legs, and you don't have to, once you purchase it, you don't have to start using it for 3 months. And
Okay,
then
there you
have
go.
a month to use it. But I think the special only runs through the end of June. So
Yeah.
it's not something you want to sit on.
That's
or
right.
maybe even mid-June.
That's right.
Yeah.
Amtrak is making a big push to come back, and I hope they do well because I'm actually an Amtrak fan. Not always the most reliable train service. If you've been in a train in Switzerland, and it says it's going to depart at 2:42, at 2:41, 30 seconds, the train rolls up and everyone gets off, and at 2:42 it departs.
Yeah.
Amtrak's not quite that reliable, but I'll take it. I've enjoyed it. In taking it all around the East Coast. And of course, my favorite is Amtrak's sleeper cars, believe it or not. Now, the olden days, you could eat in the dining car at a table with other people, and that was fun. They've now gone to box meals on the east of the Mississippi. I read they're going to come back with the dining cars west of the Mississippi, and I'm secretly hoping they'll come back with the dining cars east of the Mississippi. Just last considerations, and you all probably know a lot of this. I always tell people it's always good to compare the cost of a tour. Actually, next month I'll be doing a class on how I took a 2-week bike trip across England, and I went with the tour group because it was just slightly more than I would have spent if I'd planned and booked all my lodging myself. But I didn't have to do any of that. I didn't have to carry my stuff. The van carried the stuff. They gave us 2 meals a day. They gave us snacks, met us along the road, fixed our flat tires. Couldn't be beaten. So a friend and I went on it. They call it the end to end. That's Land's End to John O'Groats, from southwest Cornwall to northeast point of Scotland. 1,000 miles. Was a great trip. And again, there are more options still. Like Melinda will tell us more about Home Exchange. There is also one called Workaway and WooWoof, which is working on worldwide work on organic farms, which is I've had a son who's done that. It can be quite an adventure. So there are many, and I'll be doing some classes on those things. So there's other ways to stay economically. Well, any last minute comments about anything? I hope even some of you experienced travelers maybe learned something, but I know a lot of you know a lot of this stuff.
I know when you add up those costs like you did, and although I thought you were a little skimpy on the meals, if
I was.
You're in Italy, you and your wife are only going to spend $10 a person.
Yeah, no, it's
eat one meal.
it's probably gonna be more like $40 a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
For
you're
one
going to
meal out.
travel, you don't want to live off of Big Macs. You want to get the local stuff,
Yeah.
good stuff.
So, but
When are you
I'm
having
always
that?
surprised at how I even checked the untours, after and I was surprised that, of course, that is strictly you're only going to make it at least by traveling as a couple or more. But I was surprised at how expensive untours was. Now you've got everyone's taking care of it for you, but it's,
Yeah, I think the philosophy, I'll come to you in 1 second, Detlef. I want to hear what you have to say. Part of the philosophy is that Untours takes care of a lot of the uncertainty. And I think for many people, travel has such anxiety to it that anything that can relieve some of their anxiety is a help. Detlef, what were you going to add?
No, I agree with Melinda. I looked at the prices too. And for me as a single person traveling,
I know.
it's not worth using them. But if you're going with a couple,
Or
some
two
friends or
couples.
something like that, it's a great option. And like you say, people are anxious about doing the planning. And
Well, it's
so-
probably still cheaper than a bus tour.
yeah,
Yes, and more fun. I will say we have a class tomorrow night, the single and solo travel. And I'm sorry, again, it's too late for you, Detlef, but you could check into it. If
Yeah.
you're interested in just being connected with it, let me know. Cause I'm hoping that out of our travel classes and the Get Set Up community, we've got people that might want to travel with each other or do home exchanges with each other or swap ideas at the very least with each other for travel, host each other, whatever they want to do.
do you ever change the times around? Because I'm interested in that and in what Melinda was talking about, the home exchange thing. And like you say, for me, it's middle of the night.
Yeah. This
Grand
week's
one.
home exchange is at 2:30 Wednesday, our time. So that would be 8:30 your time. And
Okay, that's
I
not
always
bad.
do a class repeat, an evening class in an afternoon, and probably that single and solo travel group will find an afternoon time to meet.
Yeah,
We picked that time because 4 of the people who expressed interest were in a class that time of day. And I know that they could come back to it, but it'll be kind of an organizing class. And we'll pick another time to meet in an afternoon, maybe a couple times a week to have
Actually,
that.
Beef, we decided we're going to do the first home exchange is going to be this Wednesday at 2:30, and then the following Wednesday, and we also decided 2:30, so that, in other words, whoever saw part 1 will be able to see part 2 at the same time. In other words, if it was a convenient time for you to see part 1, it'll be the same time of day for part 2.
That's right.
and it's listed on your page, Russ.
Yes. So let me, part 2 should be, part 1 is listed and part 2 should be listed because the next week's schedule's already out. We
Yeah.
generally only schedule 2 weeks at a time with Get Set Up. So this week and next week, eventually we'll get farther in the future, but I do have classes planned out into the future and I know when they will be. So we will continue with home exchange and some of these others, and definitely with the single and solo travel. And I'm really glad that we got people from Europe with us, even in classes. There's a woman who's joined us from London every now and then, so I'm glad for that. Well,
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that Bulgaria thing too, and that holds some interest for me because I found out this last summer that apparently there's a large lake there, and before the reunification of Germany, a lot of the people in the East went there for their summer vacation. You've got this gigantic lake that's not very deep, which means it's very nice, warm water and very clean. So, for me, that's pretty easy to get to. You know, I can get on a train and get there.
Well, that class will repeat in 2 weeks in an afternoon. So again, I'll keep
Great.
an eye out,
Yeah.
Detlef. I usually do that. An evening class is repeated 2 weeks later in an afternoon, so that we try to keep track of classes switching, because I've had people tell me they want to come to certain classes and they'll say, but if you always have it at that time, I can never come. So we generally try to repeat. So look out for that Bulgaria. It should be I'm looking forward to it.
Great.
Thanks again, everybody. Good to see you all. And I hope to see you in some more classes.
Russ,
Yep.
I'm going to finish
Thank
up
you.
notes for our part 2 and try to get them to you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
So long, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good seeing you.